Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into, well, this extraordinary mental landscape of a character whose very name has become, a byword for unrestrained idealism.
Right, a figure who bravely, if maybe comically, charges into these battles that, well, they really only exist within the vast, vivid plains of his own imagination.
Exactly. We are, of course, embarking on an in-depth exploration of the incomparable Don Quixote of La Mancha.
And what's truly remarkable, David, as we delve into this narrative penned, over 4 centuries ago,
Yeah.
is the striking resonance it still holds.
Yeah.
It really connects with the intricate challenges and, frankly, the profound reflections of our own modern lives.
It really does.
This story kind of compels us to confront a fundamental question. What does it truly mean to embrace daydreams? To foster grand visions in a world that insists on being, well, relentlessly, sometimes brutally, real. And maybe even more profoundly, what are the consequences when your meticulously constructed inner reality decides to launch like a full-scale assault against external reality itself? This isn't just some dusty old text.
Not at all.
It's a profound, often hilarious, and always insightful mirror held up to the human condition. Still.
Precisely. Our deep dive today will focus specifically on Volume 1 of Miguel de Cervantes' undisputed masterpiece, first brought into the world way back in 1605.
A landmark year.
Absolutely. And for this intricate exploration, we've had the immense pleasure of immersing ourselves in a really rich Portuguese translation. It was skillfully rendered by Francisco Lopes de Azevedo Velho de Fonseca Barbosa Pinheiro Pereira Isacoelho and Antonio Feliciano de Castillo. Quite a mouthful, those names.
Huh. Yes, indeed. But a fantastic translation. And for those of you who, like us, appreciate the visual artistry that often accompanies great literature, it's worth noting the edition we've been looking at.
Oh, yeah.
It's graced with those truly beautiful, evocative illustrations by Gustave Doré. They just add another layer, another dimension of imaginative depth to the text.
They really do capture the mood.
And while the original digital text we consulted had his own technical backstory, Wikisource digitization, reverted to European Portuguese, Creative Commons, all that.
Right, the technical bits.
What truly matters for our deep dive today is the timeless story itself and the profound insights it offers.
So our mission today is clear. We aim to thoroughly unpack Don Quixote's audacious very first steps into the world of knight-errantry. That ancient, wandering, questing path.
Seeking adventure, righting wrongs. Or thinking he is.
Exactly, thinking he is. We'll trace his most famous, or perhaps infamous, misadventures and truly grapple with the deep, intricate layers of irony that Cervantes masterfully weaves into, well, pretty much every single page.
That's everywhere.
By the end of this deep dive, you should have not just a clearer understanding, but we hope a much richer appreciation for why this classic remains so timeless, so utterly captivating, and frankly, surprisingly relevant to our own lives.
Okay, let's get into it.
Now, before we fully unleash Don Quixote on his legendary, albeit often calamitous, feats, we absolutely must begin by understanding the intellectual and cultural landscape in which this extraordinary knight was first conceived.
Yes, context is key here.
And maybe more critically, we need to grasp the brilliant, often mischievous mind of his creator, Miguel de Cervantes himself.
Definitely. And what's immediately striking and really sets the tone for the entire novel is Cervantes' approach right from the very first lines of his own prologue. It's quite something.
How so?
Well, he describes his forthcoming book with this almost disarming level of self-deprecation. He calls it a skinny, shriveled, and dry child, born, he humorously claims, of a sterile and uncultivated wit.
Wow, talk about lowering expectations.
Exactly. But it isn't just false modesty, It's a subtle yet really potent form of irony, especially when you consider the literary colossus he was about to unleash upon the world. It's like an immediate signal to the reader. Hey, this book isn't going to play by the usual rules.
Right, he's tipping his hand.
Yeah.
And he takes this playful self-abasement even further, doesn't he? He openly confesses to the reader that writing this very preface, this introduction, was, in his words, the hardest part of the entire book.
Which is hilarious in itself.
It is. And then he proceeds to mock the literary conventions of his time, joking about his reluctance to include all the customary sonnets, epigrams, and encomiums, those flowery praises and dedications.
Standard practice back then. Absolutely required almost.
That were absolutely standard fare at the beginning of books in that era. It's as if he's leaning in, winking at you, the reader, saying, Look, I know how these things usually go, but I'm deliberately charting a different course here.
And this is precisely where Cervantes truly flexes his ironic muscles. He crafts this brilliant meta-commentary. He introduces a fictional friend,
Yes, the friend.
described as a well-informed and witty man who offers what Cervantes, through his narrator, labels hilarious advice on how to, quote, adorn the book.
Adorn it, right.
And this friend suggests that Cervantes should just invent the customary sonnets and attribute them to fantastical, far-off figures, people so distant and improbable they could never be verified, like Prester John of the Indies or the Emperor of Trebizond.
Just make them up.
Just make him up, explicitly stating that it doesn't matter one bit if it's all make-believe. This advice is absolutely crucial because it immediately, brazenly, and hilariously highlights the very artificiality, the pretense, the hollow superficiality that Cervantes is so vehemently railing against in the popular chivalric romances of his day.
He's basically satirizing the whole publishing industry of the 1600s. And the layers of absurdity just keep piling up. The same friend also advises Cervantes to liberally sprinkle the text with Latin quotations.
Oh, the Latin, yes.
The friend suggests it doesn't even matter, really, if these quotes aren't entirely relevant or deeply integrated into the topic at hand.
Doesn't matter at all.
The sole purpose, he explains with a knowing nod, is to impress readers and make the author appear well-read, erudite, and eloquent. He even provides a specific, though comically misplaced example. If you're writing about death, just casually drop in Horace's classic line, Polida mors aequo pulsit pede paperum tabernas recumque tures.
Which translates to, pale death kicks with impartial foot at the hovels of the poor and the towers of kings. A profound quote, sure.
But totally shoehorned in. The profound context of the quote is less important than the appearance of intellectual gravitas. It's all about looking smart.
This entire preamble, this supposedly hilarious advice, serves as a masterful, multi-layered metaphor. It works on several levels at once. It's a piercing critique that exposes the intellectual dishonesty and superficiality, not just of other contemporary authors who relied on such empty literary adornments, but more specifically, it constitutes a direct, satirical broadside against the very chivalric book Cervantes is about to dissect and lampoon. The Friends' Council explicitly frames this work as an invective against the books of chivalry, a deliberate, forceful effort to tear down the ill-founded machine of these knightly books, which have become tiresome to so many people.
So if we take a step back, what does this brilliant, pervasive irony from Cervantes himself mean for you, the listener, right from the very beginning? It's more than just a literary trick, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's an immediate, direct invitation. Cervantes is basically asking you, the reader, to question appearances, to look critically beyond the surface narrative, and to challenge conventional wisdom from the very moment you start this journey.
He is quite literally setting the stage for a narrative where nothing, absolutely nothing, is quite as it seems. It trains your eye to look for the hidden layers, the subtext.
It truly does. And with this foundation of ironic critique firmly established, where Cervantes is almost coaching us on how not to read other books, we then step directly into the troubled, yet utterly fascinating mind of Alonso Quijano.
Right, this relatively obscure gentleman from a village in La Mancha whose life is about to take an utterly unexpected and, well, irreversible turn. He becomes consumed by this obsessive reading habit.
Obsessive is the word. He devours chivalric romances with a feverish intensity, just immersing himself in works by authors like Feliciano da Silva and the epic tales of legendary knights like Amadis of Gaul.
His mind, we're told with almost clinical precision, becomes utterly flooded with all the fantastical, often violent elements from these stories.
Everything.
We hear of enchantments, quarrels, battles, challenges, wounds, flirtations, loves, tempests, and impossible nonsense. He reads so much and with such unyielding intensity that the line between fiction and reality doesn't just blur.
It's gone. Completely dissolves for him.
He begins to believe it all to be incontrovertibly true, indistinguishable from his lived experience. He would even confidently assert, in heated debates with the village priest or barber, that while El Cid was undoubtedly a good knight.
A historical figure.
Right, a real person. He simply wasn't as good, as valiant, or as cunning as some of the other fantastical heroes he had encountered within the pages of his beloved books. This isn't merely a passion, it's a complete, profound immersion that utterly reshapes his perception of everything.
And this is precisely where we witness the symbolic yet profoundly impactful birth of Don Quixote. Alonso Quijano, in a pivotal act of self-proclamation, it's almost like a sacred ritual for him, decides to add of La Mancha to his name.
Ah, the naming.
Crucial, crucial. And this isn't random or whimsical. It's a deliberate, almost reverent mimicry of his literary idol, Amadis of Gaul, who famously added of Gaul to his own name, specifically to bestow honor upon his homeland.
Making his home famous through his deeds.
Exactly. So this singular act by Quixote is far more than a mere name change. It is a profound manifesto of his intentions, a conscious, determined step into his fully self-created identity as a knight-errant. It underscores the truly transformative and, in his case, deeply delusional power of belief when it's embraced to its absolute unyielding extreme.
So if we connect this to, the broader tapestry of human experience, it raises a profoundly relevant question for all of us today, doesn't it?
Hmm.
How does our own reading, or more broadly, the vast, often unfiltered content we consume in our daily lives, whether it's the curated feeds of social media, the often biased narratives of news, or even the fictional stories we immerse ourselves in, how does all of that shape our individual perceptions of reality and indeed our very identity?
That's the question.
Don Quixote's journey begins with his mind being utterly reshaped, almost entirely consumed by the stories he devours. Is there a modern equivalent to being flooded with impossible nonsense? I mean, probably.
Oh, absolutely. It's a mirror, isn't it? We see in Quixote's transformation how an individual's reality can become an almost entirely subjective construct, built from the narratives they've absorbed. And this ultimately transforms him into the idealistic and often tragic figure of Don Quixote.
Yeah.
This compelling psychological shift leads us perfectly into his initial forays into the world as a self-anointed knight-errant, where his meticulously self-created identity immediately and dramatically collides with the gritty, unyielding, and often unforgiving nature of the real world around him.
And so we find ourselves back on the road, ready to witness Don Quixote's very first steps as a self-proclaimed knight-errant. A journey that begins not with grand feats, but with this almost poetic, deeply personal embrace of his own burgeoning madness.
Right. His first outing is beautifully described as a hymn to his own madness, a solo overture where pure, unadulterated joy just bursts forth even from the saddle of his horse. He is utterly, blissfully immersed in the glorious, self-fashioned reality of his new existence.
He's finally doing it.
He's finally doing it. And that immersion is not just immediate, but profoundly comprehensive. He rides up to what is, in plain reality, an ordinary, maybe rather unkempt roadside inn.
Humble place.
Very humble. But in Don Quixote's mind, through the powerful lens of his delusion, it is instantly transformed into a famous castle, a formidable fortress befitting a knight of his stature.
Of course.
The innkeeper, just a regular working guy trying to make a living, becomes the noble castellan, the lord of this imagined bastion. And, quite humorously, the two prostitutes he encounters there
Oh boy.
are, in his elevated perception, instantly transformed and welcomed as ladies and noblewomen of the castle, their humble status completely obliterated by his idealism. This scene, right from the outset, vividly epitomizes the profound chasm, the undeniable clash between his intensely idealized perception and the raw, undeniable rawness of reality.
The gap is just huge. And the knighting ceremony itself is truly pure comedic genius, isn't it? A masterpiece of situational irony.
It really is.
Don Quixote, with utmost seriousness and a noble bearing, kneels before the bewildered innkeeper, earnestly requesting to be formally knighted, to finally receive the sacred order of chivalry.
And the innkeeper, who's described as pragmatic and pretty quick-witted, immediately realizes this guest is, well, quite mad.
Clearly nuts.
Clearly. But he also sees an opportunity to maybe get rid of him without too much fuss. So, playing along with delightful cunning, he uses his ledger, the book for keeping track of straw and barley orders, as an improvised ritual book,
Hilarious.
mumbling what he pretends are the required prayers.
Yeah.
The knighting itself is hilariously anticlimactic. It involves a swift slap on the neck and a rather undignified whack with Quixote's own sword, delivered with a hearty thud.
Fuck. You're a knight.
Pretty much. And what's truly fascinating here, adding another layer to the absurdity, is that even one of the inn's prostitutes, the lady, whom Don Quixote has elevated to nobility, and who in turn girds him with his sword, can barely contain her laughter during this impromptu farcical ceremony.
She's trying not to crack up.
Totally. Yet Don Quixote, so utterly consumed by his fantasy, so impervious to contradiction, notices none of it, none of the absurdity. He thanks them profusely, with genuine gratitude, promising to share the honor of his future feats with them.
He's completely sincere.
Completely. He even goes so far as to politely inquire about the lady's name, discovering it to be Tolosa, the daughter of a cobbler. This scene, in its comedic brilliance, just encapsulates the core tension that permeates the entire novel. The direct, unyielding, and often painful clash between soaring idealization and the unvarnished, often brutal rawness of reality. It's a moment where the two worlds collide with maximum impact.
You can just picture it, can't you? The innkeeper barely suppressing a smirk, just trying to get through his day. The women, their hands pressed to their mouths, trying to stifle their giggles. And Don Quixote, completely oblivious, floating in his own world of noble ceremony and profound significance. This profound, if farcical encounter, however, immediately prompts Don Quixote to realize he needs two crucial things to properly fulfill his knightly duties.
Right, the practicalities kick in, even for him.
Sort of. He needs money for his adventures, and perhaps even more importantly, a squire. So he decides to return home briefly to gather those necessities. And this is where one of literature's most beloved and enduring characters makes his grand, wonderfully grounded entrance, Sancho Panza.
Yeah, Sancho Panza, good old Sancho. He is introduced to us as a neighboring farmer, described by the narrator with this blend of affection and maybe mild condescension as a good man, if such a title can be given to a poor one, and not very bright.
A bit harsh, maybe, but sets the scene.
It does. And Don Quixote, with his characteristic grand promises, manages to persuade this simple farmer to become his squire with the utterly irresistible, if completely illusory, promise of making him governor of an island.
The island. The eternal promise.
The island. Sancho's character is incredibly significant, not just for comic relief, though he is hilarious, but because with his practical, often cynical outlook and his inability to read or write, he truly symbolizes the common person, the everyman rooted firmly in tangible reality.
He keeps things grounded, or tries to.
He tries. He becomes the constant, often exasperated voice of the people, embodying pragmatism, common sense, and down-to-earth reality in stark, often painful contrast to Don Quixote's soaring, often dangerous, idealistic madness.
This dynamic duo, the idealist of dreamers soaring through fantasies and the grounded realist tethered to the harsh earth, they form the absolute core of the novel's profound exploration of the human condition.
They really do.
They are two distinct but inextricably linked sides of a single coin, constantly challenging, complementing, and at times comically frustrating each other. Their journey together is where Cervantes truly dissects the human spirit.
And if we think about the broader implications, how often do we encounter this fundamental pairing in stories, in films, in our daily news, or even within the dynamics of our own relationships and social circles, the dreamer and the realist? Yeah. This foundational relationship in Don Quixote is what allows Cervantes to explore the full spectrum of human experience, from the highest ideals to the most mundane necessities, showing how these two perspectives can clash, coexist, and even at times influence each other.
And their very first major adventure together is a truly memorable and actually quite poignant one. It immediately showcases the profound, often tragic gap between Don Quixote's noble intentions and the harsh, unintended outcomes that reality often delivers.
You're talking about Andres, the servant boy.
Exactly. Don Quixote, with Sancho now by his side, intervenes to right a wrong he perceives between a wealthy farmer and his young servant Andres, who is being cruelly beaten and tied to a tree.
Classic Quixote intervention.
Classic. Quixote, with his usual blend of eloquence and threat, demands that the farmer pay Andres what he's owed and release him. And the farmer, intimidated by the knight's formidable, if slightly rusty appearance, swears he will comply.
Seems like a win for Quixote, right?
Justice served.
You'd think. But here's where the stark, unforgiving reality crashes down immediately. As soon as Don Quixote rides away, thoroughly convinced he has secured justice and made the world a slightly better place.
Feeling pretty good about himself.
Totally. The farmer, with cruel cynicism, binds Andres again and beats him even more furiously, telling him with sadistic glee that this time his master Quixote would pay him sevenfold for the trouble.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's awful. And later, the battered and betrayed Andres actually confronts Don Quixote at an inn, revealing the full, painful extent of his continued misfortune. This excruciating encounter leaves Quixote deeply embarrassed, marking his first major, undeniable failure to successfully impose his idealized chivalric justice on a cruel, unyielding reality.
That's gotta sting.
It's a moment that utterly shatters his self-perception, at least temporarily, and tragically sets a pattern for his subsequent adventures. Good intentions, disastrous results.
And then, of course, we arrive at arguably the single most famous scene in all of literature, one that has permanently etched itself into our collective consciousness. The windmills.
The windmills. You can't talk Quixote without the windmills.
You really can't. Don Quixote spots them on the plains, their arms spinning gently in the breeze, and in his profound delusion, he immediately mistakes them for enormous, menacing giants ready to challenge him.
Not just giants, but evil giants he must vanquish.
Right, so he charges at them furiously, lance at the ready, only for his fragile weapon to shatter upon impact with the unyielding wooden arm of the windmill.
Pow. Meanwhile, Sancho Panza, with both feet firmly planted on the ground of common sense, sees only windmills. He's desperately trying to bring his master back to the obvious, undeniable reality. Master, those are windmills.
But Quixote is not having it.
Not at all. It's an incredibly powerful, indeed an enduring metaphor, isn't it? Don Quixote is quite literally fighting his own imaginary enemies, his mind conjuring colossal threats from mundane objects, while Sancho, with his steadfast practical perspective, fruitlessly warns him of the obvious reality.
And this central theme of misinterpretation and delusion extends to many other episodes, like the comical encounter with the two friars.
Oh yeah, the friars.
Quixote, ever quick to see enchantment where there is none, immediately mistakes them for malevolent enchanters who, in his twisted perception, are carrying off a kidnapped princess in a carriage behind them.
When they're just friars. Traveling.
Exactly. So he attacks one of them with characteristic fervor and a total disregard for his own safety, just charges right in.
And Sancho, ever the pragmatist with a keen eye for immediate, tangible opportunity, doesn't waste a second, does he?
Nope. While his master is bravely, if misguidedly, engaged in combat, Sancho immediately tries to strip the other friar of his robes.
Classic Sancho.
Boldly claiming that their habits are legitimate spoils of battle, a rightful prize for their chivalric endeavor.
You gotta admire his opportunism in a way.
This, predictably, leads to a rather violent and chaotic confrontation with a fiercely protective Biscayan who is accompanying the friars and the supposed princess. And it's this very confrontation, interestingly enough, that Cervantes then, quite brilliantly and rather unexpectedly, uses to introduce yet another fascinating layer to his already complex narrative.
Right, this is where things get really interesting structurally. This leads us directly to one of the most brilliant, most meta-literary parts of the entire book.
The narrative trick.
Exactly, the abrupt, almost shocking ending of the confrontation with the Biscayan. Cervantes, with an unmistakable twinkle in his literary eye, claims that he could not find the rest of the story, that the manuscript he was using for his narrative just cut off mid-sentence.
Which must have been infuriating for early readers.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But what's truly ingenious here is how he then introduces the figure of a second author and an Arab historian named Cid Hamete Benengeli, through whom he supposedly discovered the rest of the tale.
Cid Hamet Benengeli, such a great name.
It is, and the irony is immediately palpable and culturally charged because Cid Hamet is explicitly identified as Muslim. And in 17th century Spain, Moors were commonly and unfairly considered untrustworthy, even liars. It was a widespread prejudice at the time.
So Cervantes is playing with that prejudice.
He absolutely is. So the narrator Cervantes' persona within the book spins this truly elaborate and delightful tale about finding some old papers written in Arabic in the Toledo marketplace.
Just stumbled upon them.
Right. He claims to have then purchased them from a Morisco Moor who had converted to Christianity, but whose sincerity was often doubted back then, and subsequently arranged to have them translated. And lo and behold, in these newly translated papers, he claims to have found the continuation of Don Quixote's epic story, picking up right where the previous manuscript left off.
It's wonderfully intricate, deeply self-aware, a narrative trick that really blurs the lines of authorship and authenticity.
And this elaborate literary construction is far more than just a clever plot device or a momentary diversion. It allows Cervantes to profoundly comment on the very nature of truth in fiction and the intricate ways in which stories are told and consumed. Well, by introducing a fallible, ironic, and even potentially unreliable second author, a Muslim historian whose account might be questioned by contemporary readers, Cervantes masterfully blurs the lines between authorship, narrative authority, and what can truly be considered true within the fictional world he has created. It's a remarkably sophisticated commentary on the subjective nature of storytelling, way ahead of its time, long before postmodernism was even conceived.
So what does this meta-narrative, this story about the story mean for you, the listener, even today, centuries later? It's a powerful challenge, isn't it?
It really is.
It challenges your assumptions about what's true in the stories, the news, the information you consume in your daily life. It makes you pause and think critically about who is telling the story, what their inherent biases might be, and how that specific lens shapes your perception of the events unfolding.
It's a remarkable precursor to modern media literacy, really. A fundamental question about the reliability of sources, tucked away brilliantly in a 17th century novel. It forces you to ask, can I trust my narrator? Even when the narrator is supposedly Cervantes himself.
Fascinating stuff. And speaking of fiction and reality blurring, not just for the author, but also for our beloved squire, Sancho Panza.
Ah, Sancho's turn.
While he utterly lacks Don Quixote's lofty, dangerous delusions, he becomes a master in his own right at mixing the two, but for an entirely different, much more pragmatic purpose.
Yeah, he's not seeing giants.
No, he doesn't invent grand imaginary castles. Instead, he skillfully manipulates facts, bends the truth, or invents details for practical purposes, often for sheer survival or simply to humor his master and keep the adventure and the promise of that island going.
You see this wonderfully illustrated in that truly hilarious moment when Sancho manages to lose Don Quixote's original notebook.
Oh, the letter.
Exactly. The notebook containing the crucial letter addressed to his idealized lady, Dulcinea del Toboso. Instead of admitting this rather significant lapse.
Which would probably get him fired, or at least yelled at.
Probably. Sancho simply, and with characteristic resourcefulness, creates his own hilariously down-to-earth, rather crude version of the letter from memory. Or what he claims is from memory.
And his description of Don Quixote's ethereal, perfect, idealized lady, Dulcinea, it's absolutely priceless.
It really is comedy gold. Sancho describes her not as some mythical princess, but as the daughter of Lorenzo Corchuelo, and in stark humorous contrast to Quixote's delicate, otherworldly vision, as a strapping lass.
A strapping lass.
And he adds with pride, she can throw a bar as well as the strongest shepherd in the village. Not exactly the delicate flower Quixote imagined.
Not quite. This provides such a sharp, humorous, and fundamentally vital contrast to Quixote's often dangerous, always idealized vision. Sancho's grounded perspective constantly pulls the narrative back to earthly, tangible, and often quite mundane concerns.
It anchors the story, doesn't it? It anchors it in a relatable, deeply human reality, even as his master soars dangerously into the realm of pure, unadulterated fantasy. This dynamic interplay between the two is just a constant source of both profound comedy and deep, often surprising insight into the human psyche.
The relentless clashes between Quixote's unyielding idealism and the often brutal rawness of reality continue to mount throughout Volume 1, frequently with painful physical consequences for our steadfast knight and his long-suffering squire.
Oh, they take a beating. A lot.
They really do. Take, for instance, the immediate aftermath of a particularly nasty beating they received from some Yankeesans. Those were muleteers who didn't appreciate Quixote's intervention.
Another intervention gone wrong.
Yep. Our knight, ever the self-deluded hero, firmly believes he possesses the legendary balm of Fierabras.
Ah, the miracle balm.
The miracle balm, a miraculous concoction from chivalric tales, supposedly capable of healing any wound instantly or even bringing someone back to life if they've been cut in half. You know, standard stuff.
Totally plausible. And he promptly decides to test this mythical cure, of course, on himself first.
Naturally. Don Quixote, after consuming the foul-tasting concoction, vomits violently and profusely. Sounds awful.
Truly disgusting descriptions.
But then, true to his unshakable conviction, he instantly proclaims himself fully cured and even invigorated, feeling ready for more adventures.
His belief is that strong. It overrides the physical reality.
It seems to. Meanwhile, Sancho, equally battered and bruised from the beating, decides to try it for himself, desperately hoping for the same miraculous recovery.
Poor Sancho. You know this isn't going to end well.
Not at all. Instead, the poor squire nearly dies from the even more violent vomiting, intense fevers, and profuse sweats it induces. It's a perfect, visceral illustration of how Quixote's sheer belief literally bends his own perception of reality, allowing him to transcend physical pain.
Or ignore it, maybe.
While Sancho's body reacts to the brutal, unsparing truth, confirming the balm is nothing more than a potent and frankly dangerous emetic.
Reality bites Sancho. Quite literally.
And speaking of beatings, one of the funniest yet most telling episodes occurs when Quixote and Sancho encounter a group of merchants from Toledo.
The merchants, right. Another classic.
Don Quixote, without a moment's hesitation or any prior introduction, imperiously demands that they declare Dulcinea del Toboso the most beautiful lady in the entire world.
Just like that. Out of the blue.
Out of the blue, a declaration he insists upon without them even having laid eyes on her.
Which is, a bit unreasonable.
Just a tad. Naturally, one of the merchants, described as a man with a sharp wit and a healthy dose of common sense, replies that they'd gladly do so, but only if they could actually see her first.
A reasonable request.
Seems fair. But then he adds, with perfect, dry, deadpan humor, even if she's missing an eye.
Ooh, risky move.
Very risky. This audacious, sacrilegious remark about his idealized lady is, of course, more than enough to send Don Quixote into a furious, righteous charge. He cannot abide such slander.
Predictable reaction.
But in this particular instance, his trusty but somewhat ancient steed Rocinante stumbles clumsily, and Quixote falls heavily to the ground. He doesn't even make contact.
Poor Rocinante. He tries his best.
He does. Then one of the merchant's muleteers proceeds to beat Quixote so badly with such a thorough and brutal thrashing, using pieces of Quixote's own broken lance,
Adding insult to injury.
that he's left utterly unable to move. A painful testament to the consequences of demanding idealism from a cynical, practical world.
Yeah, the world pushes back. Hard.
And once again, echoing earlier events and highlighting the cyclical nature of his delusions and misfortunes, it's his neighbors and friends who eventually find him, battered and bruised, lying helplessly by the roadside.
They must be getting used to this.
You'd think so. They painstakingly carry him back home to his village. Upon his return, his concerned friends, the sensible village priest and the pragmatic barber, come up with a drastic cure for his madness.
The cure. This is a big moment.
A huge moment. They decide, with grim determination, to burn his entire library of chivalric books, believing these volumes to be the root cause, the absolute source of his insanity.
This auto da fe of books, literally an acts of faith, a term historically associated with the Inquisition, public penance, the burning of heretics.
Which makes its use here darkly ironic.
Incredibly ironic. It is one of the most profoundly symbolic and pivotal scenes in the entire novel. The priest and the housekeeper systematically throw each book into the roaring fire, often commenting on its absurdity, its harmful influence, or its potential for corrupting minds as it burns.
They hold a sort of literary trial for each book.
Exactly. They spare only a select few, deemed less dangerous or perhaps of some genuine literary merit, like the Amadis of Gaul, which ironically started it all but is seen as the best of the genre, so it's preserved.
Right. The intention is unequivocally clear. Destroy the very sources of Quixote's delusion, literally burn away the madness that consumes him by removing its literary fuel.
Cut off the supply.
Precisely. However, what's truly remarkable and utterly heartbreaking in a way is Don Quixote's subsequent reaction, or rather his profound lack of one in terms of realizing the pause.
What happens?
When he later wakes and finds his beloved library gone, walled up even, he simply explains their absence by claiming that a powerful enchanter Freston, he names him, has, through malicious magic, stolen his entire library, room and all.
Wow. He just incorporates it into the fantasy.
Effortlessly. It allows him to maintain his fantasy completely intact, untouched by the brutal reality of the bonfire and his friend's intervention. The evidence is gone, so an enchanter must have done it.
Incredible mental gymnastics.
And this brings us to one of the novel's central, most enduring, and arguably most unsettling themes. The sheer persistence of belief, the unyielding power of conviction, even in the face of overwhelming, undeniable evidence to the contrary.
You just won't see it.
He doesn't see what is. He sees only what, in his idealized chivalric world, ought to be. It's a powerful, almost unsettling statement on the human capacity for self-deception, or perhaps. Depending on your perspective, maybe it's about an unwavering, transcendent vision that actively reshapes reality itself, at least for him. Is it madness, or is it something else?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And what about Sancho? His motivations seem more tangible, more grounded in earthly concerns.
Definitely more earthly.
He stays with Don Quixote primarily for the promised island, that tangible reward, the governorship, and maybe just for the sheer novelty and excitement of the adventures, even though he's often the one suffering the physical blows and getting dragged, quite literally, into the chaos.
He complains a lot, but he stays.
He does. But perhaps if we connect this to a deeper human truth, in his own practical, down-to-earth way, Sancho, too, is chasing a dream.
You think so?
Maybe. A promise of a better life, however improbable it may seem. A hope that this mad enterprise might actually lead somewhere worthwhile. He starts to kind of absorb some of Quixote's perspective, doesn't he? Even if fleetingly. He starts seeing things too sometimes.
That's true. He gets drawn in. Their entire journey together, then, is this exquisite, constant, almost dizzying alternation between moments of profound, uproarious comedy and instances of surprising, often poignant tragedy.
It swings wildly between the two.
One moment, you find yourself laughing out loud at the sheer ridiculousness of Quixote's delusions, at his impossible misinterpretations and the chaotic consequences they unleash. The next, you are truly struck, perhaps even moved, by the profound nobility of his intentions.
Despite everything.
Despite everything, by his unwavering, albeit misguided, commitment to justice, honor, and goodness, however flawed his methods may be. It's a masterful blend that keeps you engaged on multiple emotional levels.
And that, I believe, is precisely why Don Quixote endures. Why it remains so vital, so relevant, and so deeply resonant centuries after its creation. It's not simply a brilliant, groundbreaking parody of outdated chivalric romances.
Which it certainly is.
Which it absolutely is. But beneath that satirical surface, it's a deeply human story about the fundamental, often painful, and universally relatable tension between our grand dreams, our cherished ideals, and the often unforgiving, mundane, and brutally real nature of the world we inhabit.
Exactly. Cervantes, through this epic, meandering journey, shows us, unflinchingly, that the world can indeed be harsh, cruel, and profoundly unforgiving. It often disabuses us of our most cherished delusions.
No question about that.
But he also leaves us with a profound, almost defiant question, a challenge that echoes through the ages. Isn't there incredible, undeniable value in striving for something better? In reaching for higher ideals, in believing in a nobler reality, even if those ideals seem utterly impossible to achieve in the face of cynicism and harsh truth?
It's a question that doesn't really have an easy answer, does it?
Yes.
And as we close this deep dive, perhaps that's the ultimate enduring challenge we can take from Don Quixote. It's not about tilting at literal windmills, of course.
Probably not advisable.
Probably not. Or mistaking inns for castles. But it's about finding the courage, the conviction, the spirit maybe, to stand up for your ideals, to fight for what you believe should be, in a world that often prefers cynicism, that often tells you your dreams are foolish, impractical, or simply unrealistic.
So the challenge is internal, really.
I think so. So we leave you with this thought. In your own life, what ideals are truly worth fighting for, even if they seem like impossible dreams? What are your windmills?
A truly profound thought, and a perfect encapsulation of our journey through the dusty plains of La Mancha today. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of literature's most enduring, complex, and fascinating figures.
We truly encourage you to reflect on the rich themes we've discussed, and perhaps if you haven't already, explore Cervantes' magnificent work further. It genuinely rewards a deeper, more thoughtful look. There's just so much there.
There really is. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and may your giants always be worth the fight.